Good morning and welcome to the fifth of six webinars following the saltwater opportunities in the magnificent Pacific Ocean in our backyards. In this second series of talks, we'll be looking at small craft opportunities in our local bays and inlets. The final talk will feature Graham Day on April 24th. So that's not next Saturday, but the one after that. But first, a word of thanks to our hosts, the Southwest Council of Fly Fishers International, for creating this series and promoting the webinar. Let's also thank Snowbee USA, our sponsors, for this second series of SoCal fly fishing opportunities in the salt. They carry a lot of gear that you can use in this type of fishing that we're showcasing. They've also generously donated 2 75 gift certificates, a stripping basket, and a large saltwater fly wallet to keep your flies handy. As a bonus, Graham Day has generously donated a guided day on the water, and more details will be available during his webinar on the 24th, which will be the last of this series. Okay, first a little housekeeping. This is a webinar, not a regular Zoom meeting. I'm sure many of you will have questions, and you can type these in the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. There'll be plenty of time at the end for all the questions. If you're new to Zoom, at the top right is a button that can change your view. We recommend gallery view, and you can also adjust the side-to-side size of the presentation with your cursor. Okay, one last item before we get to the show. If you go to the council website listed on the screen and click the donation button for $5 or more and donate $5 or more, you'll be entered in a drawing to win a bunch of swag. The drawing will be held on Facebook Live on April 28th at 6 p.m. Winners need not be present to win, and you will be notified by email. All the proceeds from this are going to the Southwest Council Youth Program, which is a very, very worthy cause. I'm sure you'll agree. Okay, let's get to today's presenter. Conway Bowman is one of the most noticeable brands in the fly fishing industry today. He's a legitimate born and bred California outdoorsman who not only has West Coast appeal, but is recognized and respected globally as a household name in the outdoor fly fishing world. An accomplished all-round adventurer, fisherman, and waterman, Conway Bowman's name is synonymous with extreme fly fishing. For Conway, home base is Encinitas, California, where he guides for blue water species on the fly, most notably the fast and ferocious mako shark. As the TV host of 3 highly rated and award-winning television series, The Ford Outfitters, Fly Fishing the World on the Sportsman's Channel, and 50 Places to Fly Fish Before You Die on the World Fishing Network. Conway has traveled from the remote beaches of Baja, California to the humid jungles of Thailand in search of all kinds of fishing adventures. His escapades have led him to hook a wide variety of fish. This includes Atlantic and king salmon, wild trout, carp, tuna, largemouth bass, muskie, pike, sailfish, golden dorado, redfish, bonefish, which we'll be hearing a little bit about later, roosterfish, Thai mahseer, British Columbia steelhead, striped bass, royal snakehead, and tarpon. He currently holds the IGFA world record for redfish of 41.65 pounds caught on the fly. Conway is also the author of the Orvis Guide to Beginning Saltwater Fly Fishing. When not searching for his next adventure, Conway can be found taking his 10 and 5-year-old sons, Maximilian and Jackson, surfing, fishing, or paddling with his wife, Michelle, in their home waters of Encinitas, California. Wow, Conway, that's quite a resume. I'd also like to add that Conway has the neatest, cleanest, most pleasant fishing craft that you can ever step foot on. So let's give a big warm welcome to Conway.
Thank you, Marshall.
Hey.
That was great. Well, thank you for the kind comments on my boat, which you've been on a few times over the years. And it's great to be here. You know, webinars are kind of new to me, as they are to everyone. Typically, I'm talking to crowds at clubs, you know, around the nation. But this could be part of the future. I got to get up today, cook my kids breakfast, and now I'm here with you, spending the morning with you. So thank you very much. So I grew up in Southern California, as Marshall mentioned, and I grew up fishing not only all the great freshwater opportunities, but also the saltwater. And, you know, we have so much great fishing, whether it's the beach, whether it's our reservoirs, whether it's some of our local creeks and rivers. But an oftentimes overlooked opportunity for the saltwater fly fishermen or fly fishing fisher persons in general are bays and harbors. And in Southern California, we have quite a few bays and harbors that produce some really, really great fishing opportunities for the aspiring and well-seasoned saltwater anglers. So we're going to talk about that. This is a great fly fishing opportunity right out our back door, which it is for many of us. And here we go. Fly Fishing SoCal Bays and Harbors 101. So this is going to be an introduction. So in my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the bays that I'm familiar with. San Diego Bay, which is called the Big Bay, and also Mission Bay. However, all the information that I'm going to talk about today can be applied to any bays in Southern California. The bays are very similar in their structure, in their tidal movement, and of course, the target species. So what I'm targeting down here, you'll be targeting in the LA area or just Southern California in general. So let's start with San Diego Bay, called the Big Bay. Why is it a big bay? Because it's a very big bay. And my cursor is right here. So this in the background, this is San Diego. It's a beautiful backdrop to a day of fishing. There's quite a bit of boat traffic on it. But what makes San Diego Bay so unique is its size and its amount of tidal movement that it gets. So this is the entrance of the bay here, and you have a lot of tidal movement that comes in. And what that does, it sets up some very, very, very good fishing opportunities for the fly angler. You have two parts of the bay. You have the upper bay, and then you have the south bay, which is south of the Coronado Bay Bridge. And this area is where, which is right here, this area is where I do most of my fly fishing because the water is shallower, it's warmer, there are more accessible areas in terms of piers, pilings, and some rock structures. And there's great launching opportunities, whether you're a kayaker, whether you have your own private boat, or even a float tube. You know, some people fly fish the South Bay and also Mission Bay in float tubes. So, but as you can see, it's a very large bay. So why San Diego Bay? Like I said,
Conway, just briefly, going back to that slide, are there special places you would launch like a float tube or a kayak, a small craft, rather than a bigger boat? Great
question, Marshall. Sure. So you have the upper part of the bay, you have Shelter Island, which is right here. There's one launch ramp there. It's the busiest launch ramp in San Diego Bay. It's easily accessible off Highway 5, and it's a great ramp. But also, where I like to launch is down here at J Street, which is right here, the J Street Marina. It's a much larger ramp, and the facilities aren't as crowded. And as I said, since this is my area where I pretty much concentrate most of my fishing, this is where I'm going to launch. Now, this next slide here, access to the breakwater. Let me go through all these points, and then I'm going to go back to that slide. So access to breakwaters. San Diego Bay has great eelgrass flats, which is a great habitat for all the species that we target in the bay. Sandbars, pier pilings, and excellent tidal flow, and as I said, a variety of species. Now, when I talk about a breakwater, I'm talking about right here. This is the entrance of the bay, and there's an area right here called the Zuniga Jetty. Okay, if you have a boat, this is a great place to go if you want species like the Pacific bonito. This is my wife. We were out fishing the Zuniga Jetty one day, and we caught, the bonito came in, and typically this is a spring and fall fishery. This is sort of a bonus for bay fishing. If you have the ability to get out to the Zuniga Jetty, you can have some great fishing. But if you're not into doing that, you don't have the right watercraft, we'll concentrate back here in South Bay. So there's a Pacific bonito. Now you can get these fish also in the South Bay as well. In the fall, they will move in from the from the nearshore waters, They'll move all the way back into the South Bay, and they will stay in there all winter. And they're back there. Why? Because there's food item there for them, anchovies and smell. And so as the water cools off outside, they move into the back bay where the water stays warmer, and it creates a great environment for them to stay all year. This is sort of the workhorse fish in San Diego Bay. It's the spotted bay bass. They can get up to 3 pounds. Very, very aggressive fish. They live in the eelgrass beds, and they also live in what I call bad neighborhoods. So you see all these rocks and all this kind of structure. They love living right around that stuff. Now, this structure can be right on the bank, or it could be out in the middle of the bay, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So the spotted bay bass. Okay, now the other bay that I fish is called Mission Bay, and it's the little bay, so it's very small. It doesn't have as much tidal movement as San Diego Bay, which for a fly angler is actually pretty good. If you have too much tidal movement, sometimes it's hard to control how deep you can get your fly. Much shallower, and it has really, really excellent eelgrass beds, and that is a prime habitat for bay bass, halibut, and corvina, which I'll talk about corvina in a second. The other thing about this bay is it stays much warmer than San Diego Bay. So in the dead of winter, when San Diego Bay may not be fishing as well, Mission Bay is always a great go-to spot. And if you're targeting bay bass, Mission Bay has the largest bay bass, I think probably in Southern California. A 3-pound bay bass is not an uncommon bay bass to get on the fly. So another thing, less boat traffic. Mission Bay has a lot, or San Diego Bay has a lot of big trip ships, container ships, military ships going in and out of that bay. So it does create some problems if you're fishing in sort of those areas. But Mission Bay does not have any of that. So it's a much calmer bay, and it's better for somebody fishing out of a kayak if you want to fish off of a stand-up paddleboard. But even a boat, you're not going to be dealing with all sorts of wakes and things like that to throw you off balance.
Conway, do both of those bays have rental boat opportunities, and are the boats pretty decent?
They do. That's a great question. They both do. And in Mission Bay, you have a couple of places. You have the Dana Landing. They rent really great fiberglass. They're about 14-foot fiberglass flat bottom boats without oar motors, and they are a great fly fishing platform. They're great in Mission Bay because you can maneuver the entire bay in pretty much one tide session. So a 6-hour fishing trip, you'll be able to hit all the spots, which I will go over. In San Diego Bay, it's a much larger bay. Those boats are rented at the Coronado Cays or in that general area. And it's great because those boats are really, really good to fish the South Bay. I don't think you can take those north of the Coronado Bay Bridge. Plus, I wouldn't do it because the boats are too small. And there's too much wave action. But like I said, where we live, where we fly fish in South Bay, those boats are perfect and they're great skiffs. So both of those places, Coronado Cays and the Dana Landing Market, have a great rental program, and the boats are set up perfectly for fly fishing. So Mission Bay, less boat traffic, great surface feeding fish in the wintertime and early spring, and that's the corvina, large spotted bay bass, and also halibut, which is sort of a holy grail species to a lot of fly anglers. But if you want to target halibut, Mission Bay is the place to do it. Now back to the big bay. They do have a lot of surface feeding fish as well, and the corvina is definitely the fish that does that. It does coincide with Mission Bay as well. But if I were to target those fish, I would definitely concentrate on Mission Bay, just because the easy access of getting around. So like I said, you could maneuver your boat. Let's say you rent here at Dana Landing, you can hit all these spots in a 6-hour tide period. Okay. But also it's open to the open ocean here. So if you wanted to get out along these jetties and target bonito and barracuda, which they do come in occasionally, you can do that. So that's a short fin corvina. Some of you folks that have fished in Texas or maybe Florida or maybe Louisiana, they call these weak fish or spotted trout. But anyway, this is our version of that. It's a corvina, and they are
I was actually curious, do you also have corvina with a B down there as well? Or
Yes,
are
we
they
do.
more of a surf fishing
Yeah.
deal?
And people, oftentimes people get that confused. So this is a corvina, which lives in our bays, and the corvina is the one that people target along the beach. Now there are corvina in our bays too, corvina in our bays, and you can target them as you do along the beach in shallow water. But that's a whole nother talk that I really don't do it a lot, so I can't really talk to it. But they are definitely in our bays, and our bays are set up well for that. But
that's a whole other level of frustration.
It is, and yeah. And I think at this point in my life, I don't need any more frustration. We'll leave that to somebody like Al Q. He can talk about that. But in fact, corvina fishing is a religion, and it's a religious experience if you catch one. But I haven't had a lot of success, so I haven't quite had that religious experience. But I admire the folks that do it and that are successful. But this guy right here is a corvina, great surface feeding fish. You can target these fish in the winter, in the early spring, and even in the fall if the water temp is correct, and they just love hitting the fly. And you target these fish with surface feeding flies, so crease flies or poppers. I would say next to the halibut, this is the second holy grail fish that we can catch in our bays. And of course, the spotted bay bass, Mission Bay, Michelle, my wife, who outfishes me all the time, by the way, has a nice spotty that she caught in Mission Bay. And we're towards the back of the bay. Now, this Mission Bay on average is about probably 10 feet deep. Well, it has flat. So I would say you're fishing anywhere from a foot deep to 10 feet deep. So it's not really, really deep. So it's great for the fly angler because you can actually work those shallow grass flats or those sandbars without worrying about getting your fly down to 20 or 30 feet like you would in some situations in San Diego Bay.
So Conway, I imagine that as you know, if we're talking about the people further north, all the way up to Ventura, we're more likely to encounter calico than those bay bass, are we not?
Well,
or
that's a great question.
All over the place.
Calicos inhabit all our bays, and they're more out towards the breakwater. So if you're fishing San Pedro is a very famous place and very, very productive area to fly fish. And the San Pedro jetty breakwater is excellent for calicos. Now, calicos, though they will move back into our bays, and occasionally you will catch them in the back end of the bay where you have the grass flats. That's not the habitat for calicos. Calicos are more of a open water fish, a near shore fish. Their neighborhood typically are around, rock jetties where the waves and tides are moving in and out pretty aggressively, and also kelp beds. But I have seen them in both the bays down here, and I've seen them way back in the bay. So once again, I think they will go where the food item is, and if they follow in the anchovies and the anchovies push way back in the bay, you will catch them. However, I've never seen a large calico bass inside the bay. They're always fairly small. So that might be, the little guys can get back in these bays, and they can kind of grow to the appropriate size where they can move back out into the open ocean. And like I said, they inhabit two different areas too. I've seen them over more kind of open structure in the bay where you have maybe a sunken ship, some sort of rubble, 10, 15 feet deep, and they'll be around that. But they will surface feed as well. So it's interesting to see how everything sort of coincides with where the bait is and what type of food item the predatory fish are eating. And that's always the key. But these two fish are the fish that I love to target in Mission Bay as well. So Michelle's got this beautiful spotted bay bass, and they're very aggressive. This is about an average size. And in San Diego Bay, you're not going to see this large of a bay bass because I think in Mission Bay, the bay bass can nestle down. There's not a lot of predators that eat them. San Diego Bay, it's a big bay, so there's a lot of things chasing these things around. Mission Bay is a much more, a nicer neighborhood for them to get big and fat and aggressive. So they're kind of like the boss in Mission Bay. Now this guy over here is a halibut. It's a Pacific halibut. And in the winter, in the spring, they move into Mission Bay. So they come in out of the deeper waters and they get in there. And why? Because the water is the perfect temperature, because it's shallow, there's grass flats, and also they spawn in Mission Bay. And also the food item they love is called a smelt. And there are a lot of smelt in Mission Bay. So these are the two great fish that I love targeting. And Michelle here is wearing a Christmas hat because, and the point of this slide is we always fish in the winter and always around Christmas. And this is what you can expect around Christmas time or the wintertime fishery in Mission Bay. And look at that weather. I mean, you can't beat that. So, and I think that's one reason why we live in Southern California. So this is a goal for anyone who's aspiring to fish our bays and harbors in Southern California. Okay, how do you fish the bay? And you know, a lot of us know how to fish carp in the LA River. We know how to fish trout at the Lower Owens. Maybe we've done some red fishing, a little bit of saltwater fly fishing. But it's interesting. People just look at the bay and they're like, well, first of all, are there fish in there? And second of all, wow, it seems so, it seems so big. They're boats causing wakes. How do I start? Well, the first thing you need to do is understand tides and currents. That's the most important thing, because they're going to dictate where the food item is, meaning smelt, meaning anchovies, and they're going to tell you where the fish are. And I'll get into that a little bit later. The other thing is when we're fishing our bays and harbors, water temp is really, really critical. Moon phases relates to understanding tides, and we'll talk about that a little later. Bird identification is a very important aspect of understanding how to fish our bays. If you find the birds, you'll find the bait and you'll find the predatory fish. So those are the three things that kind of come together, and the best time of day to fish. So tides, currents, and moon. The key to successful fly fishing in bays and harbors are three words: tide, current, and moon phase. Without these three components, you will be doing a lot of casting and not a lot of catching fish, which is okay, but I would rather catch fish. So this is sort of the moon and the tide is the key that opens the door to saltwater fly fishing. Whether you're fishing our bays and harbors, whether you're fishing the beach, whether you're in the Florida Keys fishing bonefish, whatever, it's the key to the kingdom. And once we understand that, we will have a lot of success, not only in those outside places, but right here in Southern California in our bays and harbors. So why is it critical? Well, first of all, bait fish and predatory fish key off of a tide. So tidal movement dictates when food is flushing in and out of a bay, all right? And when you have the maximum amount of flushing, meaning water coming in or out, it's around the moon phase. So it's either a full moon, which is this yellow one down here, or a new moon. So when I'm planning on going fishing, the first thing I do is I look at my tide chart. So if I said, well, I'm going to go fish in Mission Bay tomorrow, but wait, let me look at the tide chart. Let me look at the moon phase and see what the tide's going to do. Okay, so I'm going to look. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go on the 17th. So this is 2008, but this is just a reference, an example of how the moon works. I'll go, okay, so I'm going to go on the, let's say I'm going to go on the 18th on a full moon. Okay, but when should I go? So here's low tide at 9:57. Okay, and then the high tide is going to be pushing up to 10:53. Okay, now around those full and new moons, you have really big tidal swings. And sometimes too much of a tidal swing isn't great for fly fishing because you can't get the fly down because the tide's moving too quickly. But if we work close to these moon phases, you can find out when that tide is going to be at the perfect speed for fly fishing. So let's look at that again. So let's see. I'm going to go on. Actually, let's move back to the 17th. Okay. We have a high tide at 10 a.m. All right. I'm going to go, well, let's see. If I leave my house by 6 and I'm on the water by 7, I'm going to be able to fish almost the entire tide up to this point right here, which is the peak of the tide, which is called slack water. Okay. So I'll have really good tidal movement here. So I'll have water flushing into the bay. I'll have that water bringing in food item for the predatory fish. And as that water comes in, all that food item pushes into the bay. And then the predatory fish will gather up around the bait and hopefully start eating it. So I'll fish that, okay? And I will know that right at slack water, which is right here, right at the top of the tide, I'll know that is going to be my probably my best hit time, my best opportunity. There's like a 2-hour window, and this might get a little confusing, but there's a 2-hour window when I get very focused on fishing. I mean, really serious fishing. Hopefully I'm set up in the right spot by that time. So if high tide's at 10 o'clock here, I'm set up at 8 o'clock, 2 hours before the slack water, before the top of that tide. I'm set up in a spot where I think the fish are going to be, or where I'm seeing birds, or I've caught fish in the past, and I'm really, really fishing hard. Because at the 2-hour window coming up to slack tide is going to be your best bite time. The tide's going to start slowing down, but you're going to have enough movement that continues to move that bait. And then at slack tide, what happens, the bait fish kind of relax and they come up to the surface like this, and they kind of jiggle around. You've probably seen that. They kind of bubble on the surface, and then the predatory fish are right underneath them, and they start feeding on them, okay? And there's a relationship with birds when this happens that I'll talk to you about a little bit later. So hopefully that makes sense. So number one, when I'm ready to go fishing, if it's tomorrow, first thing I do is I look at the tide. And I figure out that slack water in 2 hours before that, and that's going to be my prime time, okay? Now, let's look at this tide chart here. This area in here where you don't have a lot of tidal movement, less productive times, okay? So just keep that in mind. So if I look at my tide chart tomorrow and I'm on the 11th and there's no movement, I'm probably not going to go. I'll find something else to do because I want to maximize my time on the water in the hope that I'm going to catch fish. And the time to do that are these full and new moon periods. Okay.
And Conway, this applies as a general principle. So you could be up anywhere on our coast.
That's right. That's absolutely
these rules will apply.
That's right. Exactly. And if you're fishing the beach, it plays the same role as well. Although beach currents and bay currents are a little bit different, but that's a whole nother thing. But always have this as your key to the kingdom. This is it. You've got a tide chart in your pocket. You look at it. Okay, I know that I'm going to be, on the water at this time, and I know slack water is at this time, and I'm going to fish very hard in those 2 hours coming up to slack. And I will tell you this: I prefer incoming tides. I just do, because it's moving in all the fresh water and all the new food item, and any predatory fish that may be coming in with it. Outgoing tides are okay. However, the water can get very murky, and sometimes that affects the fishing. So an incoming tide is my preferred tide to fish.
So the previous image, is that just something you take off the internet?
Yeah, I just got off the internet, yeah.
Do you have a particular site that you like to go to?
Well, I've got an app on my phone. I think it's called Coastal Tides or something like that. Free app, and it's great. And you can look it up. It's got moon phase, and it's got tidal swings like this. So it's perfect. So if you're out, you're at work today and you go, I want to fish tomorrow, you just ring it up. Oh, there it is. I know I'm going to get some fish at X amount of time. But I'm telling you, this is how you become a productive angler. If you're just going around saying, I'm going to go fish tomorrow, and I know many of us have jobs and we can't, we have to go when we can. So you know what? Just go fishing. But if you really want to focus in on catching fish and becoming and understanding how it all works, try to fish as close to these moon phases as you possibly can.
Great.
Okay, good currents. 1 to 2 knot current is great. Once it gets over that, it can get challenging with a fly, even with a heavy shooting head. Incoming is my favorite. Outgoing can be good. I prefer incoming. Slack water, like we talked about, that's really the 2 hours up to slack water is your hit, is your prime time. Once again, too much current is not good. And in our bigger bays and harbors, you'll have a lot of current, especially around these moon phases. So let's say that you're fishing San Pedro and you're in an area and the current's ripping 3 to 4 knots and it's just too much for you to fly fish. What I would do is I would go find sort of an isolated area where the current is a lot softer. So it's sort of like reading a river. So maybe you have a breakwater, and then on the other side of the breakwater, there's slack water, right? Or there's slower water. That's where the fish are going to move. If I'm a bait fish, I don't want to be fighting a current all the time. I want to find sort of a softer area to fish. So, and you see it in trout fishing. Your trout will find a soft water because, number one, they're not expending a lot of energy swimming the currents, but yet they're gathering in and they're taking the opportunity to get the bait fish or the flies that come in. So look for slack water. Okay. So pilings, piers, jetties create that if you're in a situation that the current is too much. There's always opportunity, but sometimes you have to go look for it. And you know, how can you tell if you have good current? If what I do is I'll look at the eelgrass, if the water's clear enough. So eelgrass during tidal movement will be slanted one way or the other, right? So it'll be like this. So this is the eelgrass. Here it is. Now, as the tide comes up and starts to slack, the eelgrass will go like this, and then it'll stand straight up. So straight up eelgrass is slack water. A slight bend in it, you're getting to the top of the tide. If it's down like this, it's ripping a lot. So the 2 hours prior to slack water, it might be like this. And then as the tide progresses up to slack, it goes boop like that. So when you see eelgrass like this, it's a good opportunity. Okay. So it's a good visual thing. And, you know, currents, you know, if the currents are running too hard one spot and you go back to an eelgrass bed and, you know, you can see the current isn't running as hard and you'll see the eelgrass like that. That's a great place to fish. It's all about controlling your fly too at the appropriate depth. Okay. Okay. Why is current important? As I said, that prime time, slack water 2 hours prior, it triggers fish feeding behavior. And I think predatory fish, they understand the tides. They know it's coming in. They're coming in behind the bait fish. Or if I'm a bay bass and I'm living down deep in this eelgrass like this, and all of a sudden it starts pushing, I'm going to get myself in position to start looking for that food item that's coming over my head. So it's being pushed in. And then I'm going to set up when that tide goes slack to go up and eat that food item. The thing about bay bass and the thing about a lot of fish in our bays, other than corvina and bonito and barracuda, are they're not pelagic, meaning they don't move around a lot. Bay bass, by and large, are going to inhabit one area. That's their zone. And once you find them, that's where they're going to live. They're not going to be swimming around the bay unless, you know, there's not a big migration thing with bay bass.
I think they behave a lot like smallmouth bass. You know,
they do.
They like that rocky structure. They don't travel very far from home.
Right.
They ambush things. It seems like they're very much cousins in that way.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, if you look at their body structure, they're just kind of these stocky little things. And they're not made to be pelagic. They're not made to move. They don't look like they're not like a corvina that swims around and chases bait. So they're opportunists, right? So if I'm a bay bass, I'm in the eelgrass, I know the current's going to do something. I know when the water hits slack, that food item's going to pop over my head, and they are going to inhabit areas where there's food, right? The only thing that's going to move them out is if there's a lack of food or something happens to the food base. So in our bays, we have areas that are very consistent on food items. So triggers feeding behavior. It stacks the bait fish together in the current. So let's say we're fishing along a piling or off of a sandbar. As the current's coming off the sandbar or the piling, the bait fish will find that soft zone in the current, right? And then when we slack off, then they'll kind of be like, oh, they'll be out and about, almost lost, looking around. And then that's, if I'm a predatory fish, that's what I want. I want those fish to be confused so I can go ahead and grab them and eat them. So I always think like a fish. I always try to think, what would I do if I were this bay bass, if I were this halibut? And it seems to work. So let's see, your stacks the bait fish. Okay. All right. When current is best, new and full moon. We talked in detail about that. Get a good tide chart. And I'm going to keep stressing, get a good tide chart, because that's really it's going to make you successful. It's going to help you understand. And once you understand, then the puzzle will be when you can put the puzzle together. Okay. High tides are great tides. We talked about that. Flows over eelgrass, the last 2 hours of an incoming tide to slack water. That's when I'm really, really concentrating on it. Okay, now, this is an oftentimes overlooked part of fishing for a lot of anglers, not only conventional anglers, but also fly anglers. You go out to the bay, you're trying to find the right tide. You don't see anything happening. You know, it looks dead. But all of a sudden you see birds get very active, right? And you see them diving and they're sitting on the water and they're flying around. I would say all the stuff I've talked about previously, the bird activity and bird identification and what they're doing is very important to me because it's a visual cue that I can see immediately. And that's going to focus my energies on that area because when you have birds, you have food item. So you have anchovies, you have smelt, you have sardines in the general area, okay? And once again, you know, fish are pretty lazy and they're going to go where the food item is. So birds are my best indication where the predatory fish are going to be. And let's talk about the birds. The first bird I look for is a tern. This is a tern, and you'll see them flying around, and they're really graceful, and they'll fly, and then all of a sudden they'll hover like this, and they'll dive. Boom. When they dive on the water, I'm gonna be like, okay, I need to be there. So I'll motor over to that. If I'm in a motorboat, if I'm on a kayak, if I'm on a stand-up paddleboard, I will go to where that tern is flying. If they're kind of just cruising around in a general area up really, really high, what that means is there's food item there, but it hasn't floated up to the surface yet, meaning we haven't got to that slack tide period, okay? But they're there. When the terns are flying closer to the water like this, that means we're getting close to slack tide, and they're on the top of the water because they know the opportunity to get some bait fish or get a meal is close. You know, they know it. So that's very important to watch terns. Terns are the best birds to watch. This is an example this is actually a seagull diving on some bait fish. So you can see that, those little, I call those rain bait, very small anchovies. And so he dove there. This could be a fish here that was surfacing on the surface. So those are great keys. Now, of course, we have pelicans, and pelicans are great too. Oftentimes you see a pelican just sitting on the water or a group of them, but they will not let the bait get too far away from them either. So, but I want to stress terns, pelicans, and seagulls. That would be the order. And remember, flying close to the water, the bait fish are up close to the surface. If the birds are flying high off the water, the bait fish are much lower, but they're in the general area, okay? So remember, so here's the order. Tide, shark, tide. You go out, you're looking for birds. And then you've narrowed sort of your scope of where you need to concentrate. And this is what I like about this sort of fishing. It's sort of like hunting, right? You've got a game plan together and you're putting all the pieces together. It's like a big puzzle. It's the fly fishing puzzle. Water temperature. The magic water temp number for me in our bays and harbors is 62 to 74. Once we're in that range, the fish are around. I find our bays and harbors in the wintertime can dip below 60. If the food item is present and the fish have no place to go, they're going to be around the food item. But I find once it hits 62, that's when it gets really, really good. And once you get, in that range to 74 can be good. But after 74, it seems like things really slow down. But also, part of the reason why I'm not usually fishing the bay when it's 74 degrees is because I'm out targeting other things, because that's usually early summer, late spring, and then I'm out targeting other species. So don't underestimate the potentials of our bays and harbors in the summertime. And I do know anglers that do have great success. You may have to change your game plan. Fish may be deeper because the water's warmer. You might have to, rely on a surface temperature chart like this to find that nugget of cooler water. But it can be done. So, but if you were to ask me, 62 to 74 is prime water temperature.
Right.
Okay. Now we talk about food item. These are the two primary food items that are in our bays: anchovies and smelt. So anchovies are sort of the go-to for every fish. Smelt are an interesting fish in that they're sort of very slow-moving fish that kind of they're in groups, small groups, small packs. Once in a while in a big school, but this is a great food item for halibut. So if you're targeting halibut specifically, they love smelt, and smelt typically are in shallower water. And that's right where the halibut are, around sandbars that margin things like eelgrass beds. So if you want halibut, find the smelt. Everything else eats anchovies. And there are other food items too. We have ghost shrimp. We have all sorts of little shrimp in the bay. But these are the two that your flies are going to probably imitate most. Okay, tackle. This is important. I don't go out with a 10 weight when I'm fishing the bays and harbors. It's either a 5, 7, or 8 weight. That's about as big as I go. Even though you do have the potential to catch a big fish, an 8 weight is probably it's gonna be fine. There really isn't anything in the bay other than a bat ray or maybe a leopard shark that's gonna spool you. And even though you may catch them, it's highly unlikely you're gonna get them. And if you do, you'll probably break them off. Okay. All of my rods are 9 feet long. Reels, any reel that you use in a warm water situation is going to be fine. Any reel that you use for bass, salmon, steelhead, or if you fish the beach, they'll work fine. You should have at least 100 yards worth of backing on there, and it can either be Dacron or braid. I prefer Dacron because it's much easier on the fingers and it doesn't wrap under itself. If you get a big fish and it runs, and you reel braid back on the reel, sometimes it gets woven underneath, and that can be problematic because if you hook a fish down the road and that fish runs, that when the braid wraps underneath it, it'll create a knot. So I love Dacron, and I know it's kind of old school, but 20 to 30 pound Dacron is really great. It's easily manageable for me as an angler on the reel. And large arbor reels, I mean, I think everybody has large arbor reels these days. Fly lines, a 5 or 6 weight rod, I use intermediate lines. Intermediate lines are really great, and they've really come a long way. The reason why they're great, especially when you're fishing shallow bays like Mission Bay or the South Bay, is that you can control your fly much better. The fly is not going to sink really fast, but if you need to get it down, you can make a cast up current and let it sink to get deeper. You can also adjust the depth of that fly by shortening your leader and using a heavier eyes on the fly. So an intermediate line is kind of my workhorse line. But to have a 200 grain shooting head or integrated head is great if you have to fish in deeper channels. And of course, if you're using an 8 weight, which you really don't have to, but if you want to, a 250 to 300 grain head's fine. The problem with the heavier heads is that you have less control of what's going on. The fly will get down very deep, very quickly, and then all of a sudden you're hung up in the eelgrass or you're hung up on a piling. The intermediate line, if you're patient and you understand how to, count it down, meaning, let's say I'm fishing along a jetty and the current's ripping and I make a cast and the fly's not getting down deep enough. What I'll do is I'll bring the fly in, I'll shorten my leader and put a heavier fly on, okay? And then I'll throw up current, and that will let the fly sink down into the appropriate depth, and then I'll strip it back. And sometimes, in fact, not sometimes, a lot of times, as that fly is sinking and swinging, just like in steelhead fishing, those fish will come up and grab it. And remember, if we're around that 2-hour window to slack water and we're fishing fish that are opportunistic, they're gonna take that food out of it. If it drifts past their face, boom, they're gonna grab it. Okay. A lot of times you don't even have to strip the fly. So
basically, your surf fishing setup will work perfectly well, which would be your number one up there, 6 weight with a
absolutely
intermediate or a 150 to 200 on it. That would be great.
That's great. That's great. And like I said, the bays that we're fishing, yes. I think I've seen people really they really want to fish deep in the channels in the bays, and that's great. And they catch larger fish. They catch the barred sand bass. But for me, the experience is being able to really, fish these fish in shallow water and really, not be overweighted with a big heavy line and an overweighted rod. Because we're matching our tackle to the fish, and when we're catching fish that are by and large, 3 pounds, I'd rather catch them on a 6 weight. That's just me. But Marshall makes a great point. Anything you're going to use for your surf fishing situation is going to work fine. I would say instead of having a bunch of rods, just basically have some interchangeable spools. And all the rod reel companies now have great, inexpensive spools that you can interchange on your reel. So I'd have my intermediate, my 150, 200 integrated shooting head, maybe a heavier one, just in case, as long as your rod can handle that heavier head. But oftentimes you're not going to have to go over 200 grains. Okay. So, and, the key is being able to cover every situation, or most situations that are presented to you. Like anything else, you can't cover everything. I mean, you'll be sitting there and all of a sudden something will happen and it's like you're totally unprepared, and that happens. So, but that's what gets you back every time. Leaders, keep it very simple. So I'll talk about all this, but I'm going to tell you one thing: short leader, a single piece of monofilament or fluorocarbon, and make it short. Okay, no longer than 6 feet. And if you need to get deeper, shorten it up. I've caught all these species on leaders that were probably 3 feet long. You know, remember, these fish are predators. They're not leader shy. They're there to eat. Okay, so it's not like we're out on the tarpon flats or the bonefish flats trying to convince a spooky bonefish to hit a fly in shallow water. So, and a shorter leader is going to make it a much more easier casting situation for you. So here, I'm just kind of tinkering around here. So I don't have like fancy fly boxes and stuff. You know, I just have a little Tupperware that I have all my stuff in it. I've got tippet, I've got flies, and it makes it very simple for me. I can just throw it in the boat and I'm gone, you know. But if you have a fishing vest, it makes it nice. You can get to your stuff really quickly, have a good pair of clippers. Another thing I suggest is have a net. I know that oftentimes people think saltwater fly fishing, you don't need a net, but I will tell you, it really makes it much easier to get that fish in and to release it, especially if you catch a halibut. Halibut have very, very big teeth, even small ones. And if you're there, you can't lip them. In fact, you can't lip most saltwater fish, by the way. They all have teeth, the ones we're targeting. So trying to lip a halibut, they'll drive their teeth right through your thumb. So a net is great. A pair of pliers, if you can get a boga grip, that's really, really good. And then the long nose pliers, you can take that fly out of their mouth and release them. And all my hooks are barbless too. The reason I have barbless hooks is, number one, it's an easier release on the fish. And number two is that if I get hooked anywhere in the head or in the arm, I can pull the fly out. And if you are fishing in a boat with a buddy, I will tell you, at some point, you probably get hooked, because when the bite's on and things are getting exciting, people oftentimes don't really look where they're casting. So barbless hooks. And with a barbless hook, if you keep tension on the fish, and remember, these fish fight really hard, so they're always going to be pulling away from the tension. They're going to keep that hook lodged in their mouth. They don't shake their head like a trout. They don't shake their head like a tarpon. You know, once you hook them, they want to get into their neighborhood. They want to get deep into the eelgrass, or try to wrap you around a pole. So they're always pulling you. So when they pull, you keep positive tension. You're going to get them to the net in most cases.
Conway, would you, if you were, say, doing a rental boat, would you bring a stripping basket or a bucket or some kind of line managing device?
Yes, I would. That's a great idea. Yeah. So Marshall brings up a good point. Stripping baskets do a couple things. They keep the line off the deck, meaning you're not going to wrap around a cleat or an anchor rope, or you won't step on it. And number two, you're going to be able to strip off enough line to where you can make a very accurate and longer cast every single time. They're great. And especially if you have two people fishing in the boat, you know, you don't have line wrapping around your buddy's ankle or around his head, or not wrapped around your head. So it's a great thought to have. And you don't have to spend a bunch of dough on it either. You can just go, like, I'll go to like Walmart or Target, and I'll buy it's like a little clothes basket, and you can put a couple of, you know, bungee cords on that, and that works great. Or a small trash can. Go to Home Depot, and they have these very small trash cans that work great. And if you get a small trash can, what I would do is once I get on the boat, I would put a little bit of water in it, about that much. Okay, so it'll weight it down, but also that water helps keep the line from tangling. So, but those are all great things. And if you don't have a long way to travel, you're not hopping on a plane, just throw the thing in the back of your car, and then you can travel to, whether you're fishing San Diego Bay, Mission Bay, Pedro, wherever, it's right there and it's ready to go. It's also kind of cool, those baskets, you can put all your rods and stuff in it and walk around, rather than, you know, I used to do this. I'd have a rod, and then I'd have my bag, and then I'd be kind of just all over the place. But the stripping basket is a great thing to carry everything. So your rod, your tackle box, your beer, I don't know, whatever you want. So, but it's really cool. But you see here, I've got all kinds of stuff going on. I've got my clippers around my neck. You know, I've got a little box here with my tippet and some flies. So
Do you fish barefoot like you would on a flats boat?
I do. And so it's interesting. I do that because I when I'm fishing in tropical climates, I want to feel that line under my feet. And a lot of times in tropical climates, for me, a stripping basket is more of a disadvantage because I have to keep managing the line, even though the wind blows down there, it blows it around. And sometimes the stripping basket blows off the boat, or I can't really concentrate on getting that line in the basket. But what we're doing in our harbors and bays, it's great. We don't have a lot of wind here. I mean, that's the great thing. So you can really get that fly line into that basket. But yeah, fishing barefoot is what I do. But when you do it, you got to be really careful that number one, there are no hooks or anything on the deck. The other thing is stubbing your toe. And I've done that over the years, and that is very painful. So if you're comfortable doing it, go for it. If you're not, you know, there's always a risk something's going to happen if you're in bare feet. So, but I do it, and I have stubbed my toe a lot of times, and I've stepped on hooks. Okay, flies. So bait fish patterns like we talked about that imitate things like a anchovy or a smelt, and these are all sort of the patterns that do. So this is a Clouser minnow. I mean, everybody knows that. This is what I call a searching pattern. It's chartreuse and white. It's a great pattern. And it really, it's usually the first fly I put on just to see what's going on. And then I'll go from there. So if they turn off from this, I'll switch it up. Then you've got a Lefty's Deceiver. These are just traditional saltwater flies. Okay. Green and white. This looks like a smelt or an anchovy. This is a sarmul mac. It's got a lot of flash in it. So it looks like a sardine, a mullet, or a mackerel. Not a lot of fish in the bays feed on mackerel unless they're tinker, very small mackerel. But this is a good all-around fly that looks like all the food items those fish are eating. And then the crease fly right here. That's what I'm using when I'm seeing surface feeding fish. So we find those birds picking and we see boils under the birds. The first fly I put on is a crease fly. Okay. I suggest have a number of these in your fly box in different sizes. And different colors. So green and white, blue and white, those are kind of my go-tos. The great thing about this fly is also, so I'll fish it with a 200 grain shooting head as well. If I've got fish, especially bay bass, deep in the eelgrass, I'll shorten my leader and I'll put a crease fly on there. And what it does is as you make the cast, the fly line sinks and it drags your fly down and almost suspends the fly. And then when you strip it, it goes like this, and then it kind of floats up like this. And oftentimes on that float up, as I call it, the fish will come out and grab that. So it's kind of, it really teases the fish. Sometimes it drives them crazy. They just can't stand seeing that thing just suspended in the water. So, but it's a very effective technique if you're fishing. I call it a margin. So you have eelgrass, and then you have hard sand right here. So I'll fish the crease fly right off the eelgrass, and I'll suspend it right on the side, right where the sand is. And those bay bass will either come out or they'll come up out of the eelgrass and hit it. And oftentimes you'll see that too. You can also fish that fly on an intermediate head also. In fact, that's what I'm doing a lot of times if I've got surface feeding fish. I don't use floating lines in the bay at all. So, but it's a great fly to have. It's a well-rounded fly. The only thing is it does get kind of chewed up. So I would have a good assortment, a fairly good number of them, and it's a go-to fly. And once again, that sucker's barbless right there. So okay, so this is called a Foxy Clouser. I use this in Mission Bay a lot. It's got a weed guard on it because once again, Mission Bay is very weedy. Okay, and sometimes you have to navigate through those weeds. So a weed guard. If you're a fly tire, I would suggest on all your bay flies if you can work in some sort of monofilament weed guard because it really works. But this is a very small fly. It's probably one that I would use for bonefish, but the eyes are much heavier. Okay, but this looks like bait fish. It looks like a small, maybe a ghost shrimp, maybe a little crab, something that kind of inhabits those areas in the bay. And this is sort of another sort of little clouser type minnow, kind of a flashy. The color of it is really interesting. It's kind of orange. So here's a tip. When you're fishing bay bass, and you want to figure out what they're eating, look in their mouth, and their mouth's going to be a certain color. If it's really, really orange, that means they're eating crustaceans. So they're eating clams and they're eating ghost shrimp and things like that. For some reason, that food item makes their mouth really orange. So if I catch a bay bass, let's say I get a bay bass on a crease fly, right? I had him feeding on the surface, and then that bite stops, okay? But what I'll do is once I get that fish in, I'll look at his mouth. And if it's orange, I know at some point during that tide, once that surface bite stops, they're going to go down and they're going to hunker down and they're going to start eating things that are sort of this color, right? So those are clams, ghost shrimp, things like that. So keep that in mind.
Also notice that you're tying all those with a little loop knot, which I think is important too.
So loop knots are great, and the reason why is because they give the fly a lot more action. And as you cast the fly out, when the fly falls, they'll kind of do this. When you strip it, it'll just, it'll kind of wiggle around. Really great knot. And I use a figure-8 loop. That's what I use. It's a very simple knot. Learn it. And I use it on not only saltwater fishing, but I use it for bass. I use it for pretty much everything except trout. It's a great, great knot. And when you go to Florida, if you ever have the chance to go do some saltwater fishing in Florida, Louisiana, wherever, you're going to want those flies to have that movement. And any guide that you fish with is going to say, do you know how to tie a loop knot? Unless they tie it for you. And I always want to tie my own knots, but a figure-8 loop is excellent. And that's what I use.
Good.
Okay. Now this is called a Les's Shaker Shrimp. A buddy of mine, Les, tied these for me years ago, and I still have lots of them, and I do tie them. This is a great fly because it looks like a ghost shrimp. And there are times when bay bass, halibut, spotted bay bass, and even corvina feed on ghost shrimp.
This looks like a fly that was tied by a committee.
I know. Oh yeah.
They couldn't agree on what it was going to be, but they threw in everything they could think of.
Les is a little ADD, but he tied a great fly. And it's funny, this fly, he pitched it to one of the fly companies. He said, "Now we can't tie this for you because it's not sexy enough." But the thing is, it catches fish like crazy. So anyway, but the reason why this fly is so good, it has a rattle in it. You can see this little rattle right here. So a lot of the things that are in the bay when they move around, so let's say this is a ghost shrimp or a crab, when they move, they're sending their little legs and their claws go click, 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 click. And if I'm a bay bass, I'm like, oh, let's see, where's that coming from? So this little click in this fly creates that click, 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 whether it's falling, whether you're stripping it, and it's a great fly. So it's got a couple things going. Clicks, it's got this little kind of rubber tail on it that kind of rotates around, creates some sort of commotion in the water, a vibration. You got to remember, bay bass, they're just hunkered down in the eelgrass, and sometimes they can't see anything, so they're relying on all their senses to get a piece of food item, right? So they have a lateral line that picks up all sorts of little commotion, maybe vibrations. They have really good eyesight, they have great hearing. So this fly kind of encompasses everything that you want in a bay fly. So
I got a question about that, which is worth answering right now. Is that called the Les Shaker Shrimp? What was the name of that?
Yeah, the Les's Shaker Shrimp.
Okay.
I don't even know if you can find them anymore. In fact, I haven't seen Les in years, but that's what I call it. But it's great. And anybody looking at this and your fly tie, go ahead and tie it up. It's excellent. It's got very heavy bell eyes on it too, so it sinks down very quickly. But you can experiment with it too. Use lighter eyes, tie it without eyes. In fact, tying it, I've got some without eyes on it, and it kind of glides across the top of the eelgrass, which is excellent. And some of mine have a really prominent weed guard as well. You can tie them short, you can tie them long. They're excellent. But it has everything the bay bass wants. It's got noise, it's got vibration, and it looks like the food item they're targeting.
And it's got everything that fly tying purists would absolutely hate. So
yeah, and that's why I love it.
It's got it all there, so.
That's why I love it. No, no. And you know what? Fly fishing is whatever you want to make it. You know, we're out there to have fun, right?
Right.
And hey, it's just go have fun. And this is more of a proper ghost shrimp fly. This is a good one. Now, this was sort of out of a box. I put a weed guard on this one. I didn't show it, but I tied in a nice mono weed guard here. So this is a good one, but it kind of gives you a general idea. Okay, this is a nice anchovy pattern. This is a great fly for any of the bays, whether it's, you know, Mission San Diego or some of the bays up north. It's just a good general food item fly, and it has a lot of flash in it. And bay bass and corvina and halibut react on flash a lot. So this is kind of an example of some of the crustacean flies that I like to use. Once again, this is a bigger fly. It's got a little weed guard on it. This is, I would say it's kind of a ghost shrimpy kind of something, but the color orange in it really is the key to its success. And I've caught a lot of bay bass and a lot of halibut on it. Halibut loves the color chartreuse, by the way, and I think that's probably why this works well. So if you're targeting halibut, have a good selection of chartreuse type flies. For whatever reason, they really like that color. And then here's a little crab pattern that can look like, you know, anything. It could look like a shrimp or a crab. And here's kind of a standard bonefish fly with a weed guard on it. That's just a good all-around crustacean pattern. Okay, casting from a boat. So I talked about this earlier. If you're fishing along a jetty or a piling, the current's ripping too quickly, cast up current and let the fly swing down, get it deep, or whatever appropriate depth you want it to be. And when I'm fishing from a boat, I'm always casting up current because I would rather be deep than a little bit deeper than too shallow. Because if my fly is deeper, I can control where I can pull it up to the appropriate depth. But if I'm up here all the time, I can't get it down. So I'd rather start deep and pull it up into the water column. Okay. Keep your rod tip on the water while stripping. This is something that's very important. You know, when we trout fish, we do a trout set, right? We lift the rod tip. When you're saltwater fly fishing, especially with fish that are just coming out and grabbing a fly and pulling it back, if you lift your rod tip, a lot of times you're pulling that fly right out of their mouth. So if the rod tip's on the water and you have a straight line to your fly while you're stripping, you're feeling positive tension while you pull that fly. So you're pulling the fly like this, and then you get hit, boom, you're right there. Okay. The other thing about having the rod tip on the water and having a direct line of tension to your fly is if you're stripping a fly and you have the tip off the water, you'll have a very small loop of slack line. All right. Now, because these fish hit so aggressively and so quickly, even with that little bit of slack line, you may not even feel the hit. Or you'll see the line move, and then by the time you react, the fish is gone. So you want to have positive tension to that fly at all times. And the way you do that is you have the fly on the tip of the rod either on the water, or what I do is I stick the rod tip in the water. And I just have it directly to that fly. Once you kind of master that, you'll be catching a lot more fish. People miss a lot of fish because they don't have that direct line of tension on the fly. Vary your retrieve. You know, you're going to find fish at certain times of the tide. They want the fly to go a certain speed. Always use a strip strike, meaning once you feel that tension, just go ahead and pull the line back like that, and hopefully you're going to come tight. Another thing is learn how to double haul. You're going to be able to cast a lot further. And it doesn't, you know, it's really good. The further you cast, the better off you are because you're covering more water. Even if you're casting up current, if you make a 40-foot cast up current, that's going to drift quite a ways away from the boat, and that fly is going to get down to the depth that you need it to be. The other thing, so this is just a shot of how you double haul. But double hauling is really important. Now this next photo, so we've got our stripping basket, and as Marshall mentioned, what I'm doing here, you see the rod angle. So this is tip to the water. I'm positive. I have positive tension on the fly, so I'm ready for that fish when he hits. But the other thing I'm doing is I'm doing a two-handed strip, meaning I've got that rod under my right shoulder, and I'm pulling the line from the first guide, and I'm stripping. Okay, like this. Okay, this does two things. Number one, it makes the fly swim through the water without stopping. And remember, saltwater bait fish rarely stop. They're always moving around. They don't do this like an anchovy won't do this and go, and stop. And a predatory fish, they want something to be moving away from them, So with the two-handed strip, you can continue to move that fly through the water, but you can also control the speed. So if you needed to go faster, 2 strips fast or 2 strips really, really slow. But it's keeping that fly going through the water. And even when you're using a crustacean pattern, like a ghost shrimp or a crab, if you look at a crab in the water, they don't go like this and then they sink. They're always moving, right? I've seen so many saltwater fish react to a fly that's being stripped, and the minute that single hand strip is stopped and the fly starts moving, like falling, the fish goes, whoop, I'm out of here, and they just leave. They split because it's not normal to them to see that. So the two-handed strip, you continue to move that fly through the water no matter what speed. So it can be fast. If you get a reaction and you see the reaction, you can slow it down, but it's always moving, moving, moving. And that is really, really important in saltwater fly fishing. Not only fishing our bays and harbors, but anywhere you go, whether you're targeting redfish, tarpon, bonefish, permit. And I would hope that, if you haven't done that yet, go and fish all these other species. But our bays and harbors are a great training ground for all of these techniques that you're going to be using at all these other places. So double haul, two-handed strip, very, very important in saltwater fly fishing, even in our bays. And you'll see your sort of your catch total go up once you kind of master those. There it is. That's the holy grail right there. I just love fishing halibut. So this is the final slide. But I just wanted to show people that this is not an uncommon fish to catch in our bays, especially our shallow bays. And halibut, they're just, as I said, the holy grail. And that's what I love to target in the bay, as well as the other species. But if I get an opportunity to go for one of these guys, I'll do it. But that's my wife, once again, out fishing me with the biggest halibut of the day. So
that's great, and that's a nice fish. Tell me, the rumors have been going on for years about how the bonefish are the bonefish a reality as a target species down there, or are they a once in a while lucking out thing?
No, they are. In fact, I had a photo of a bonefish. I'm going to go back a little bit and show you the bonefish. Is that okay, guys? Is that okay?
Sure.
Let me go back, because for some reason I missed that. But there's a great picture of a bonefish that I had. There it is. Okay. Well,
there it is. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a great question, Marshall. And they haven't been rumors. We've had a really a pretty robust population of bonefish in San Diego Bay, the South Bay, primarily, for many years. Nobody really knows how they got there. I talked to a biologist, and actually the bonefish's range goes all the way to San Francisco. So they've always inhabited these waters. But I think the conditions back there are just primed for them to kind of, to have a sustaining sort of population. So this is a kind of an average sized bonefish you'll catch in the back of San Diego Bay. They're I think they're called a Pacific longfin bonefish. So they're not the ones that you're going to catch in Florida or the Bahamas, but yet they fight the same. They fight very hard. The difference is they're primarily targeted in deeper water. You don't see these fish up on the flats. So you're using this is where you would use a heavier sinking, an integrated shooting head, like 200 grains. And you would fish the deeper channels off pier pilings, off sort of the motorized channels in the bay. And then if you're in the back of San Diego Bay, there's some kind of deep holes back there where they hang out. And it seems like they like hanging. They congregate in schools in these deeper holes. And deeper hole, that's 15 feet. But they do not get up on the flats. At least I've never seen it. But I haven't targeted them a lot. Right. The conventional guys catch a lot of them, and some very large ones. There was a 23-incher caught last year, which is a large bonefish.
They congregate down in schools so they can have meetings about how to piss off anglers. That's what they do.
Yeah, how to fool fly anglers into trying to think that they're going to catch them. But you can catch them on a fly. It just, for me, it's a lower percentage shot. And when I fish bonefish, I like seeing how they react. So though they're a great fish, I think I'm going to bone fish in other places. But let me get back to that other photo. You see, but they're definitely there, and they're also in Mission Bay, and they're honestly they're up in all of our bays and harbors because they're indigenous to this area, so they're around. So there's that beautiful halibut. I'd rather catch these guys. You can sight fish to halibut as well. When you get a very clear water situation, usually in the early spring, and you find these fish up on the sand flats, it's really good. In Mission Bay, it's excellent, and I'm sure there's some bays in Los Angeles where they have nice gradual kind of tidal flats that are clear, and you can walk those flats and you can see the outline of the halibut laid on the sand, and it's pretty cool. So,
okay, we got a few questions that have popped up.
Okay.
Oh, you got a conclusion?
I'll just do a conclusion. We have a very unique fishery here in Southern California in our bays and harbors. It's close to home. Many of you probably live very close. Very accessible. You can rent a boat. You can launch your kayak. You can launch your stand-up paddleboard. You can launch your own boat and really have some great fishing. And it gives you the chance to not only develop your great saltwater fly fishing skills to prepare you for, another experience, whether you're in Florida or the Bahamas, but also, you have the chance to catch some really, really nice, strong fighting fish on the fly. Okay.
Great. That's great. I got some great questions actually. Okay. And a really good comment on flies came from Richard Cullop, who said that one of his favorite flies for San Diego Bay is a crazy dad, which was originally a smallmouth bass fly. And we were talking earlier about how, that crustacean thing, these little, anything rusty colored crab-like is probably going to be effective on those fish.
Very effective.
So, smallmouth bass flies, and they'll also hit clousers, minnows, little white flies, things like that.
Yeah, and they're predators. They're opportunists. So if the food item's there, they're gonna go for it.
And like a lot of those bass, they're probably intense night feeders as well. So I'll bet you 3 o'clock in the morning is a great time to fish.
Hey, I've gone out at night and I fished under the lights in San Diego Bay. It's unbelievable, especially for corvina. Those are by and large nocturnal fish. And if you're into like night fishing, you can do it. And all the bays, Mission, San Diego, and the bays up north, you can fish under those lights and have a really, really great time.
Okay, we got a really good question from Rich Peters, and it's, can San Diego Bay be effectively fished from shore by walk and wading?
The only place you could probably do that would be around the Coronado Cays, the South Bay. Much of San Diego Bay is not accessible. There are a lot of big piers, but the South Bay presents a better opportunity. But I would start over there I think it's called Glorieta Bay, and you can fish around there. But I think your best bet, because it's such a much larger bay, is to probably rent a boat to get out. Because part of that bay, it's interesting. A lot of the good fishing is in the middle of the South Bay. It's in the so you have the currents that run around and push a lot of the sand in the middle of the bay. So if you can get to those flats in the middle, which is it's way out there, that's where you really want to be. But there are opportunities for sure. It's just again, it's one of those things you have to go out and find the appropriate spot. Look for all the food item, the birds, and all that. You might have some success.
Okay, another question from the same person is Mission Bay seasonal in terms of different areas which are more productive than others?
I like fishing Mission Bay in the fall and winter. That's when I really like to do it. Right now it's good too, early spring. What happens in the summertime, it gets way too much traffic on it with jet skis and all that goofiness. And it's just not a fun day on the water. So seasonal, yes. And the photo I had of Michelle with the Christmas hat on, that's one of my favorite times of year to fish. Dead of winter, it's great.
Right. Another question from John He is, do you fish your flies with the current, not against the current, right?
With the current, I let the current push the fly down like this. So I don't throw into the current and let it drift towards me, because I can't control the fly that way. So if I'm in a boat or wherever I am, I'm figuring the currents, let's say the current's running this way, I'm throwing up current and letting the fly swing down. And then it's got movement through the whole swing cycle, and then I'm bringing it up. And bring it up into the current. And remember, bait fish always have their nose stuck into the current. They're rarely going down. So, once you make that swing, even though you'll get hit on the swing, most bait fish have their nose into the current. So, with that kind of cast,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul Sharman is asking, do you still find yellowfin croaker in the bays? South Bay was always a favorite for them.
South Bay is great for yellowfin. Another great surface. Hi, Paul. It's been a long time, man. I wish you'd come back to the U.S. I miss you. We all miss you. Anyway, yellowfin croaker, South Bay is excellent, and they're a surface feeding fish. So you'll see them mixed in with corvina. You'll see them mixed in with the bonito. They're excellent, really great fish.
Okay, and Cece's asking, what's Michelle using to hold the halibut, which I think was a boga grip.
A boga grip, yep. Get a boga grip. That saved my fingers for many years.
They also give the weight of the fish.
They do.
They don't all do that, but some do and some don't, I think.
Yeah, the bogas, I think they all have, I think it's an IGFA official weight. So if you catch that world record bay bass, you won't have to take it to a meat market and get it weighed.
And you'll probably catch that the very first time you're out when you're just fooling around and you're not quite sure what you're doing.
Right. And then you'll lose it because you don't have a net.
Right.
Get a net.
Okay. I think I've covered all the questions that are coming in online. Nope. Somebody's asking, Con, what fly did you catch the world record redfish on and where? And thanks for a great presentation.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. So I caught that in Hopedale, Louisiana, and I got it on a fly called the Halley's Comet. It's a purple and tan crab pattern. It kind of looks like a very small blue crab. And it was caught in the dead of winter. I think it was January 4th, many years ago. And it's also the Louisiana state record still, which is amazing. I can't believe it.
That is cool.
The story is I wanted to throw it back, but the guy wouldn't let me. He's like, "Oh no, we're going to keep that. It's a world record." I'm like, well, I don't really care about that. So I got in the world record book.
Good. Yeah. Paul is also mentioning that Tidelands Park used to be a good place for wading.
That's a great spot. Yeah, you're right, Paul. So Tidelands Park in San Diego Bay is excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Got a few compliments here. Excellent program. Great program. Thanks, Conway. And Paul says he'll be back home this year for some catching and fishing. So
let's go. Come on, Paul. I'm waiting for you.
I think we've covered all the questions. I think I got them all. So Conway, that was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Inspired us to get down to your part of the world, and and remember, this is all applicable to what's going on up here as well.
That's right. Yep. So anything we talked about, you can apply to your bays up north, and you'll be successful.
So the final slide up there is from Southwest Council. So considering a donation, just click on the donate button, and you'll be in the drawing for. For my money, the guided day with Graham 2 weeks from now would be well worth the price of admission. And don't forget that Conway is also actively guides. I don't know if he does. Do you guide all year, Conway, or do you really focus?
My season pretty much starts around Mako season, but I do some bay guiding a little bit in the wintertime if I've got time, But yeah,
Yep. All right, folks. Thanks once again, and thank you very, very much, Conway. It's been great, and I would encourage you all to first of all donate, and second to tune in for us 2 weeks from now when we'll be just looking at other aspects of local bay fishing, different kind of crafts you can use, probably a little more focus on the northern areas. So we're going to have the whole West Coast covered by the end of this series. So thank you all very much. Thanks for signing in. Don't forget to hit the donate button. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.